So recording. And I just want to be able to make sure that I can see the comments for anybody that's watching on Facebook. We have some folks watching on the webinar, and you can leave any questions or comments on the question and answer um, Zoom part or on the Facebook Live comments if that's how you're watching. So please feel free to leave comments either way, and I will try to check in on them so we can answer anything as we go along. I will introduce myself. If this is your first VIP live broadcast or webinar that you're attending as part of our second annual Social and Environmental Justice Conference. This year, obviously, all being done virtually. So I'm juggling the Zoom and the Facebook Live and the presentation and all that. So hopefully it all goes down pretty smoothly. But thank you for joining us. With us right now is also Aditi Varshnaya. I hope I got your name right. Please feel free to chime in and correct me if I didn't. And if you'd like to just introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll get into the topic at hand and get into the presentation. How's that sound?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much, Tom. I'm really excited to be here with you guys. My name is Adi Varshney. I work with Gaia, the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. More about our organization later as the US-Canada Zero Waste Communities Coordinator. And I am a community organizer here in New York City, and I have a background in city planning. So with all of this, I mean to say that I take a very much community-based social justice oriented approach to building zero waste communities. And I'm really excited to be sharing that with you guys today.
And thank you for being here. Like I said, from Valley Improvement Projects, Tom Helm, a co-founder, project director, and continuing our series of social and environmental justice webinars. Just a few days ago, our last one that Bianca hosted was about zero emissions vehicles and moving towards a zero emissions future. And along the same lines, we're going to be talking about moving toward a zero waste future. Kind of even looking past the next steps of recycling and composting and reusing. What does a completely zero waste future look like? So we're going to talk about some of the local issues and why this pertains to us here in Stanislaus County, and also be looking at ideas for the future and possible campaigns that we can do here locally. So if you're listening on the webinar on Facebook and you want to get more involved in these issues, please don't hesitate to reach out, and we will actually be having kind of a second part to this at the beginning of next year, and getting a little more in depth into the topics that you're going to hear about today. Since we started a little late, we'll go ahead and get started now, and I will share my screen. And I will have to switch over because somehow two different presentations got created, but I have them both up, so I'll just switch when we get to that part of the presentation. So welcome, like I said, our second Social Environmental Justice Conference. Obviously, instead of just having a one-day event, we're having a series of virtual events throughout a few weeks. So if you haven't already seen, on our Facebook page, we have the flyers with all the dates and ways that you can register. If you're not able to watch on Facebook, if you don't have Facebook, you can always register for the webinar and be able to watch. And just a shout out to our participants that are joining us right now on the webinar. And it looks like a couple of viewers on Facebook as well. So please go check out the other topics that we're going to be discussing coming up. So this one, as was already mentioned, is about a zero waste future, moving towards zero waste, and also what's going to come in between that, especially here locally, where we're lacking on even some basic recycling needs, kind of how to move in that direction with some local campaigns that we're going to get into. And just quickly, a little bit about waste in Stanislaus County first. This is a picture of the landfill and the waste trash incinerator out off of Highway 5 near the town of Crow's Landing. And did you know, an interesting fact that the city of Modesto had the first free voluntary weekly residential curbside recycling service in the entire country. Um, that was pretty surprising to me when I first found out. It was not run by the city. It was actually run by a nonprofit called Ecology Action, and that was back in 1972. And it's just interesting to think about, because today, Modesto, which is the largest city in Stanislaus County, and one of the larger cities in the state to not have a basic curbside recycling program. There are other cities in the county and parts of unincorporated parts of the county where you can get recycling. But for the majority of the city of Modesto, we have the black bin for trash and the green bin for organic waste, but there is no blue bin. So we had a campaign that we called Bring Back the Blue Bin, raising awareness of the fact that we've gone in the last almost 50 years, 48 years, we've gone from having the first curbside recycling program in the country to not having any at all. And we'll get into a little bit on why, what reasons there might be for that. So just a little bit on our waste here in the county. Like I said, the landfill out off of Highway 5 near the small town of Crow's Landing. About 230,000 tons of trash get dumped there a year. That was the 2019 number anyway. Just keep in mind that's 460 million pounds of trash in the year being put into the landfill. About an average of 763 tons or 1.5 million pounds every day. And that's increased in the last 4 years, at least from 2015 to 2019, it's increased by 62%. So we are definitely going in the wrong direction as far as creating less waste. We've been creating more, at least that's going into the landfill. And about 25 to 30% of that is residential waste, about 70 to 75% is non-residential, so from businesses, schools, or government entities. But that's only about half the story, because here in Stanislaus County, we have one of only 2 trash incinerators in the entire state of California. It was recently, there was 3 of them, the one here, one in the city of Commerce in the LA area, and the other one in Long Beach, also in the LA area. And now we are down to 2. The one in Commerce recently closed, and we still have the one here in Stanislaus and in Long Beach. So only 2 in the entire state of California, just the 2 trash incinerators. And just a little bit of information about that. It's actually getting a little old. It was built in the mid to late 80s. Cooperation between the county, the city of Modesto, and Covanta, which is the incineration company that actually runs incinerators all around the country, maybe even all around the world. It's located right next to the landfill, so they're both basically in the same spot in West Stanislaus County near Crow's Landing off of the 5. And like was mentioned, is almost up to 800 tons of trash goes into the landfill every day. Well, we also are burning up to 800 tons of materials every day which is about 1.6 million pounds at the incinerator. So it's about half and half. That's mostly the large majority is local trash, the stuff that's going in your garbage can or from businesses, the large dumpsters. There is some industrial waste, industrial waste from outside of the county, and even outside of the state. It's only a few percent of what gets burned there, but if you're burning 1.6 million pounds, then we're talking about a lot of stuff that's even coming from outside of the state. And it could be like large pallets of industrial waste. Like I know, for example, when I took a tour of the incinerator, they had pallets of like faulty ink cartridges, and another time there was large pallets of different chemicals, like cleaning chemicals and stuff like that. That I don't know if that's regular, but that's some of the stuff that I saw, and that other folks that we've talked to that have been there in person have seen. And it does create energy. The main point is to reduce the mass of the waste, but they also produce energy. But they also emit air pollution and create the ash, which is toxic ash. So there's obviously some problems with incineration. It's seen as an alternative to putting trash in a landfill. But what ends up happening is we're putting a lot of pollution into the air, and that toxic ash is going into the landfill anyway. So it emits particulate matter, PM 2.5 and PM 10, which is the maybe if you attended some of our other workshops or one that we have coming up on air quality and air monitoring, you'll know that the particulate matter is the ultra small fine particles. It's 10 times smaller than the width of a human hair, that can go into your lungs and not get filtered out, so it gets into your bloodstream and cause all kinds of health problems that they're learning more about every day. It also emits nitrogen oxides, or NOx, which also it emits volatile organic compounds, which when those two mix together in the heat and the sunlight, it creates ozone, or what's known as the bad ozone, not the ozone up farther that protects us from the sun, but when it's at the ground level and you're breathing it in, it's bad for the human health and for public health. In addition to those criteria pollutants, air pollutants, it also emits toxins such as dioxin, lead, mercury, cadmium, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, hydrogen chloride, and ammonia. And like I mentioned, the fly ash that comes out after the trash is burned is toxic. It must be put in a special place in the landfill. The landfill here locally has to have a certain certification to be able to even put the toxic ash in there. And that also contains metals like lead, cadmium, zinc, copper, nickel, which goes to landfill. It does create energy. It's not energy that's used here locally. It's sold on the energy market. From the last information that we were able to get, it actually was sold to the city of Anaheim. And just a fun little fact, it used to be able to be considered renewable energy, which was not due to any kind of scientific definition, but because of basically a political deal making in order to get some of the Valley representatives on board with a bill. A deal was made to allow this only incinerator. Like I said, at the time, there was 3 in the state, and this was the only one that was able to count as renewable energy. And that is no longer the case. From what we've been able to find out, there's been new state laws that have made it so burning trash cannot be counted as renewable energy anymore. And why that was an issue is because if Anaheim is buying that energy and putting in their energy portfolio that they buy and use so much renewable energy, it means that real renewable energy from real renewable sources isn't being used. So it's kind of greenwashing the idea of renewable energy. Um, for a while, Covanta, the incinerator, would table at the local Modesto Earth Day event, and we would go down there, ask them some questions about how environmentally friendly they claim to be. I was told at various times that all of the recyclable and compostable material was taken out before it was burned at the incinerator. I found out after personally going on a tour there that that was not the case. From what I saw personally, there was lots of recyclable and even compostable materials in the piles that were going to be incinerated there. They do recycle some metals. It used to be just the ferrous metals. They have a giant magnet that would just sweep through and get out some of the metals. I think they are getting more metals out, but it's still, I believe, after it's burned. So after some of that pollution is released into the air is when they take the metal out. Another issue that we have with incineration is it disincentivizes local diversion efforts and recycling efforts, like Modesto having a curbside recycling program in the largest city in the county. Stanislaus County is also one of just a handful of counties in the state that doesn't have a carpet recycling hub here in the county. You have to go up to San Joaquin County, or I believe Sonora has the other closest carpet recycling area. And from what I've been able to find out from some of the trash haulers and some of the carpet installers that usually take out the old carpet and give it to the trash haulers is it's dozens of tons a day are of carpet is being burned at the incinerator instead of being recycled, and they have to burn their 800 tons a day, which is what they have. That's what they're capable of burning every day. So if they're not burning that much, they're not creating as much energy and being able to sell it. So it's a profit motive to burn things instead of looking for other ways to divert them, like recycling, composting, reusing, and things like that. Also, just want to quickly say welcome to John Mataka, who is joining us as well. He's going to be speaking a little bit about the history of environmental justice movement against the incinerator here locally. But just the one last point that I'll make with the problems that we have with the incinerator and incineration in general. Most incinerators, the vast majority of them in the country, are located in low-income communities, communities of color. It's a well-known environmental justice issue that's usually where these types of polluting sources are placed. And wouldn't you know that this one is near the closest town is Crow's Landing, which is one of the smaller, more rural, more Latino communities in West Stanislaus County. It's also near a lot of other communities in the west part of the county that are, historically farm worker towns, and a lot of Latinos, Spanish speaking. And John, I don't know if you would like to take over and talk a little bit about. I don't think you knew I was gonna have this picture right here of of back in the day, but of
No, I didn't.
talk if if you wanted to bring up about the Surreal Report and kind of, it's not just a coincidence that a lot of these polluting sources are put in those kinds of communities. And then if you're able to see the slide, right? To kind of go off of some of the fights that have been had in the past, even before Valley Improvement Projects was around, about them burning medical waste from out of the area and trying to expand the landfill, and just kind of the other sources of pollution that there are on the west side of the county, and the tire fire that happened there. I'll let you take it away and talk a little bit about that. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, well, thank you. It's a privilege to be here tonight. You know, I guess I would say that I've lived in the West Side since 1979 after moving from the West Side of Modesto. And when I got out here, I didn't really realize to the extent that we were being dumped on out here. And then when I got out here, I found out that we had the only tire incinerator in the state of California that was burning. That there were 45 a canyon of 45 million tires. So we fought to get those in smaller piles because we knew that one day they might catch fire and be a catastrophe. Well, in 1999 they caught fire and 9 million of them were on fire. And 34 days later, we forced them to. The community did force them to put it out, and they called in these firefighters that used to do the oil wells in Saudi Arabia. Uh, uh, it, John Wayne made a movie about them, and they brought in this huge equipment and huge hoses. First, they said you couldn't put it out. No tire fire had ever been put out, and we said, "Well, you better put this one out, or we'll put it out, and you're probably not going to like the way that we're going to put it out." And so they got the drift, and they basically 34 days later it was out, and then there was a cleanup that we had to follow. So I saw that, and then I found out we haven't had a trash incinerator, garbage incinerator in at that time it was Ogden trash incinerator. Now it's Covanta in Crow's Landing, and they burn 800 tons of garbage a day there. And they claim that it's the water that comes out of the stack is like what do they call it, steam, which is nonsense. We know that it produces one of the chemicals it produces is dioxin, because which is the same stuff that was in Agent Orange. Because when you burn plastics, that's a result of burning plastics. So we've been, have been fighting that. But in the middle of that, in 2000, in Oakland, California, they closed down another incinerator in Oakland in a community off a high street where there were 22 schools within a mile or two radius. So the people closed it. And then we found out through the help of Green Action and Bradley Angel at the time. They called us and said, "Hey, you guys know, probably don't know it, but the county did a sweetheart deal with this company. They're going to start bringing the medical waste from the incinerator in Oakland that we closed down over there to you guys." So we organized, and we went to Modesto to a high voter area. At the time, it was over there by Griseda Park. And we told everybody we could tell to call the supervisors, complain that we didn't want medical waste here. We told people, tell your doctors. They told their doctors to call. And within 3 weeks after the proposal came out, the board of supervisors unanimously said that no, they weren't going to do it, because they said they'd never had so many phone calls since the time that they had been on there about an issue with people's doctors calling and stuff, and that they were not going to burn medical waste in here. So it was a huge victory for us out here, and it really for the whole county, because I don't know, out here the wind carries it. Whatever is out here, it carries it a long way. Give you an example. When the tire fire burnt, it took ash all the way to Fremont and was messing up the, the paint on people's cars in Fremont. And then it also was making the bottom of swimming pools in Modesto all black on the bottom. So whatever burns out here is going to float to Modesto and beyond, to the bay. So anyway, so we stopped that. Well, then as happens, you get one victory, and then they come back with another proposal, because trash is big business. The mafia taught us that. If you watch any mafia movies, you'll know that garbage companies and trash is big money. So they wanted to make a landfill expansion. At the landfill, we have the only landfill in Stanislaus County, Fink Road Landfill, which is right there next to the incinerator. And I think that they were probably at some point planning to bring the issue up of medical waste again, or maybe to burn some of that trash rather than just do it. But they had the plans to make it an expansion, and it would have caused, they were going to bring trains of garbage from LA and the Bay Area and they were going to make a mountain of trash high enough. I don't know how many stories the DoubleTree Hotel is, maybe 15, and it was going to be that high, full of garbage. And so we organized again, and we had the fighting spirit because we had just beat them on the medical waste, and we fought and we fought and we fought, and we were able to stop that. And in the process of stopping that, we got rid of the supervisor out here at the time. His name was Paul Caruso. We got rid of him. And we also, the CEO of Stanislaus County at the time had to resign because what we found out was there was a lot of business being, he tried to buy the burned down site of the tire incinerator, and he had some money given. There were some financial issues that were all involved, all the issues out here, the tire fire, the landfill expansion. The county bought way more land than they could possibly need, right, out there. And so basically it was a big political thing. The supervisor got tossed, the CEO got tossed, and it was another victory for us there. Now, those are probably the two biggest victories, along with the fire caused the tire facility to finally shut down. But I guess I'll just say this: we have pesticide issues out here, and actually pesticide. I'll give you an example. This last week, I walked outside to go to work, and I smelled this really different smell. It was a chemical smell. And the next day when I got up, I still smelled it, but it was about half the strength. So I sent an email to the ag commissioner and told him I wanted to know what pesticides they had permitted to be used both of those days, and I want him to get back to me, and I'm still waiting on a response. So we have a lot of issues out here, but that Sorrell report basically said that these companies that want to put these polluting businesses, to put them in Spanish-speaking communities, low-income communities, Catholic communities, agricultural communities, and that's exactly what they did. If you go up and down the 99 and Highway 5, all little towns like Grayson and Kettleman City and Buttonwillow and all these little towns, they have a lot of polluting industry, and they followed that Sorrell report to the T, because they said that these communities would not stand up to stopping them because they knew that the communities were poor. They had to work hard to survive. They probably wouldn't have time to go to meetings to fight things, right? And then there was the language barrier, mostly Spanish speaking, and you have to fight like hell to get information in Spanish from them. So that was kind of the issues that we fought out here. But that's when we learned about environmental racism, and we said, well, why is all of this happening out here on the west side of Stanislaus County? Because they always said, the incinerator is clean. It doesn't pollute. Oh, the tire incinerator is clean. It doesn't pollute. Well, if it's so clean, why don't you put it over there in North Modesto? Why don't you put it in Turlock? Why don't you put it in Ceres if it's so clean? So we know that that's nonsense, that they were basically putting it in our community because at the time the CEO said, well, there's nothing out here in the west side except squirrels. Yeah, he actually said that, besides squirrels, like basically, saying that the rest of the people weren't nothing. So those are some of the issues that we fought out here, and I guess that's about all I really have to say, Tom.
Well, thanks, John, for always providing us with a lot of history and information. I know you've been at it a long time out here, and we always appreciate all your work. And yeah, just another comment on the Sorrell report. They specifically said Catholic communities, non-English speaking communities, rural communities. I mean, they basically did everything except say Mexican American or Mexican, farm worker, Latino communities would give up, give the least amount of fight if you tried to cite a polluting industry in their area. And this goes, all the way back to history of racist development of communities, of sticking certain people in certain areas that made it a lot easier to then put the pollution in those areas when it was time to cite industry and pollution. So thanks again. I'm going to go to the next slide, which I believe this is the point. Like I said, we had a technical glitch where I somehow two different, oh wait, no, it's after this, sorry. Somehow two different documents got created with the presentation on it, but we're good. I have to switch it up after this part. So Aditi, I will let you take over from here.
Yeah, sure. So again, my name is Addie and I'm with Gaia. Gaia is a global network of more than 800 grassroots groups, NGOs, and individuals all around the world. Valley Improvement Project is one of our incredible members that we love working with. And it's really inspiring to me to see, how this fight is truly both local and global at the same time, because we also work with organizations facing the same fights in India, in Southeast Asia, in Chile. It's really all over. So I'm really excited to be here with you. Our vision is for a just zero waste world that is built on respect for ecological limits and community rights, where all people are free from the burden of toxic pollution and resources are sustainably conserved and not burned or dumped inevitably in the backyards of people who are marginalized in society. So we work to catalyze a global shift towards environmental justice by strengthening these kinds of grassroots social movements that advance solutions to waste and pollution, because we're not just pointing out the problem here, we're building solutions that make the problem itself obsolete. So that's kind of what we've tried to provide you with the zero waste master plan, which that's what I'm basically pulling from to convey this information to you. It's this great document that we put together that draws upon the diverse expertise of the organizations and individuals in the Gaia Global Network to get people understanding, like, what is zero waste. It gets people to thinking about why it's important, but as folks who are living where you live, you guys definitely have a firsthand sense of that. But we want people to understand what is zero waste and what is not zero waste, and what are people trying to sell to you about those concepts. We get you through the nuts and bolts of developing a community-based zero waste plan. And we also explain a menu of common sense implementation options that are grounded in environmental and social justice. And more on all of that later. But just to start off, Tom, do you have control over the slide deck?
Yeah, I was going to say, just let me know when you want to go to the next slide.
Great, thank you. Could you go to the next slide, please? Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so, just to get into the what is and is not zero waste part, there's been in recent years a lot, or I guess for decades, greenwashing from companies that are trying to tell you, like, oh, our practices are actually sustainable. We're going to use the nice language that people trying to make real improvements in your communities are using, and twist them on their heads and sell them back to you so we can keep making a profit off of them, which is why we're at Gaia and, as members of the international zero waste community, really focused on having an accurate and overall, a well-rounded and concrete and widely accepted version of zero waste. So this definition on the slide here is the peer-reviewed, internationally accepted definition from the Zero Waste International Alliance. And so it's a bit wordy, but we'll break down what this means in a bit. It's the conservation of all resources by means of responsible production, consumption, reuse, and recovery of products, packaging, and materials without burning and with no discharges to the land, water, or air that threaten the environment or human health. Next slide, please. So, that's kind of the ideal. And then in practical terms, this definition of zero waste has 5 overarching principles. So number 1, having a goal to end disposal in dumps, landfills, and incinerators. And, we get a lot of pushback from people who are hearing about zero waste for the first time. And they're like, why are you calling it zero waste? Like, why do you have to end waste? Why can't you just call it less waste? But in our view as a zero waste movement, like, we need to be talking about what it is that we're actually fighting to get at. Because think about like pedestrian fatality policies in towns and cities. They're not talking about having a goal of less deaths. People talk about no deaths because none of that is acceptable. So it's a goal and also a journey towards that goal that you're trying to achieve through policy, because you're trying to strive for zero because that is what you mean and that is what your values are, and your values will dictate the way that you create those policies. So that's why we say we're implementing a goal to end waste disposal, not reduce waste disposal in dumps, landfills, and incinerators. And you'll see it in the way that a lot of cities have their plans written out. They'll call it a zero waste goal with like percentage landmarks or along different years, like 0 by 2030, for example, is a common one. So the next principle is to require producers to redesign and take responsibility for the full life cycle of their products. Consumers don't create waste. The people who originally created those products are the people who are creating waste, so we bring the producers back into the equation. It's not just the people who are using the thing and throwing it out and the city or town that has to collect it and burn it. It's the producer who has to be involved in this process as well. Zero waste also means that we do not consume more than the planet can continue to provide. I think that one is fairly, fairly straightforward. We also need to be developing systems and infrastructure to separate out discards and recover maximum resources for reuse, recycling, and compost. So right now, if your trash is all going to the incinerator, you're just sending it all into one place. You don't even know what could be taken out and put towards a better use, because it's all just, taken for granted that it's going to go elsewhere, when really there's so many opportunities to pick apart what your trash, what your discards are, and see what can be turned into something else, what can be used again, what can be returned to enrich the soil. And then number 5, zero waste requires us to ground decision-making in social and environmental justice, and to respect and engage all sectors that form the resources ecosystem. Social and environmental justice and incorporating all voices isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do, because that is how you ensure that policies stick with people, that they become adapted into culture, that people are actually providing the full range of solutions, and you're not just looking at one small population that this might work well for, but it doesn't necessarily carry over to everyone else. So this is the really holistic way that we are trying to create a zero waste future. And you'll see more about that in the Zero Waste Master Plan. And I don't know if there's a follow-up email going out, but would it be cool if I put a link to that somewhere?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Great.
Can we put that in the chat? I'm not sure, actually. I
can do that in the chat right now. So yeah, that's where you can see this document. And it's a pretty big document, but it's broken down into different concepts. So I really encourage you guys to check out the areas that you're interested in learning more about. Next
or maybe
slide,
even, the comment section on the Facebook Live video might be a good place to share links as well.
Oh yeah.
Either now or afterwards.
Definitely. I will get on that after I'm done talking. Cool. So, that is what we're thinking about in terms of what is zero waste. And we also have a way to prioritize actions. I know that, these principles encompass a whole lot. So figuring out how to prioritize actions is a really key part of, coming about with a zero waste plan and engaging in advocacy. So if you could go to the next slide, please. We have the zero waste hierarchy, which ranks resource management strategies in order of the highest and best use of a material to the lowest use of materials, with the aim of minimizing the amount of waste created in the very first place. So right at the top, we want to refuse what we don't need and change the way that we produce and consume by redesigning business models and goods and packaging in order to reduce resource use and waste. And then after that, you're looking at policies that reduce and reuse. So you're minimizing the quantity, the toxicity, and the ecological footprint of consumption. After that, you also want to make sure that things can be prepared for reuse. You have material recovery. So, it's when you're looking at basically the traditional reduce, reuse, recycle, some people know that that's a hierarchy, but there's actually a whole lot more to it. And recycling / composting, it comes kind of in the middle of a whole lot of other actions. And so this is a helpful guide that we go into a lot of detail in the master plan that lays out like what to sort of prioritize when you're thinking about, hey, is this a policy that we want to consider pursuing?
And I was able to share that link to the Facebook video for folks that want to go check that out.
Great, thank you. So I'm not going to go through the steps of creating a zero waste plan, but I did want to sort of give you a taste of the different sorts of ways that communities can approach zero waste. And we have examples and case studies and best practices laid out in the master plan. And this is sort of the order in which we present them in there. So, zero waste infrastructure investments can invigorate reuse and reduction efforts and provide spaces for good jobs in disassembly and recycling and composting at the end of a product's life. And this can, this groundwork of infrastructure can bring an economy into what a lot of people are calling circularity, like circular economy being one of those big buzzwords these days. So it's a really exciting opportunity to not just get closer to climate and environmental goals and clean your air, but it's also an opportunity to create really good green jobs and options for long-term economic development in the area. Around banning disposables and creating reuse and refill systems. Again, those are straightforward strategies to reduce waste at the source. Even though a lot of states, I know California isn't one of them, have bans on single-use plastic items, a lot of people are getting really creative with coming up with reuse and refill systems that make it so that disposables aren't the most convenient way to go about things. And I'm sure Miriam will talk about this later, but Berkeley's got a really great, California's got some really great examples of reusable ordinances that other places are taking inspiration in writing their own legislation around the country. Again, there's a ton of ways to assist businesses in embracing zero waste practices, whether that's supporting businesses that provide zero waste goods or services. That's all instrumental in creating a zero waste plan. And there are countries, there are businesses all around the country who aren't waiting for that prompt from the policy level, but are already out there doing it. And they serve as a really great blueprint. We're seeing zero waste vending machines located in convenient areas with personal care products and food. We're seeing zero waste food delivery services, zero waste cup sharing between different kinds of coffee shops and downtowns. There's a lot of innovation in this field, and it's really cool to see. Institutions can also lead by example. So local governments and other institutions like universities can leverage their purchasing power and create local markets for zero waste products and services, shift a really substantial portion of municipal waste streams, and serve as a model for citywide change. So, oh, sorry, I'm just looking at John is saying something in the chat and I didn't want to miss it. Monterey County landfill has a great recycling and reuse center where items are cleaned up and resold. Cool. Yeah, so the city of San Francisco does a great job in leading by example before they roll things out citywide. They make sure that they can function, like they can achieve that on the city level. We're also seeing some colleges who are enacting zero waste policies on campus and that having an effect on the surrounding community. So these big anchor institutions, whether they're like the cities themselves or counties or schools or hospitals, that is a really important lever for creating wider change. We also have really helpful tips on writing zero waste contracts. So places can actually follow certain best practices to draft recycling contracts that increase transparency, promote waste reduction and diversion, and support workers' welfare. And like John was saying earlier, the waste industry is big money. And so when these contracts come up for renewal, that's a really huge opportunity to make serious changes in the way that the system operates. And so it's an opportunity to, again, go beyond just the goal of zero waste, but also write in things about community education, about workers' protections. So something to consider in the years leading up to when a contract renewal is happening. Again, like I was talking about before, we need to be encouraging source separation and waste reduction. So reducing and separating waste out at the source. So like when you're throwing things out is a necessary part of minimizing waste streams and also ensuring that what you're throwing out isn't contaminated so you can actually prepare it for, reuse, recycling, and compost. If you're trying to recycle something, but it's got something totally different stuck to it, that means it's contaminated and you can't actually recycle it. So it's as good as going to a landfill when you're putting in the recycling box. So having really clean source separated streams of waste and having the infrastructure and education and all of that to ensure that happens is another really key step in building a zero waste community. Then of course, food waste is really key. And that's something that people get really excited about because composting is fun and food is obviously a good way to, food is something that people are really excited about and food is something that brings people together. And so we often find that conversations about food waste and compost are really good entry points when you're trying to talk to your community about waste issues. Of course, implementing universal recycling and composting. You have to make sure everyone has access before you can make it mandatory. And places around the United States are on different scales of getting there. The United States is behind in terms of what about 40% of food goes to waste. Yeah. And in a time like this where food insecurity rates are so high, that is unacceptable and a complete, failure of our systems, which is why, again, holistic change is something that we look to pursuing when designing zero waste policies. Construction demolition debris is really important, especially in cities that are growing really quickly. Houston, being one of those cities, has a really innovative reuse warehouse where they, they allow companies to bring in waste and other companies can like take it and repurpose it at a lower or free cost. And so things as simple as that can have a big impact on something that's a really significant portion of a lot of cities' waste streams, especially in, again, rapidly expanding areas. And then closing the materials feedback loop. So I know that can be a little bit wordy sounding, but while some waste reduction measures are going to have to fall within like the corporation decision, or the federal government, which has the ability to regulate that corporation, there's still a lot of things that state and local and governments can do to stop and slow this incessant influx of waste coming into your communities. Because it's like, you can do everything you can within the boundaries of your county, say, but that doesn't change the fact that Procter and Gamble, that, I don't know, Lay's, they're making all of these products that are coming into your communities. So there's a ton of ways that cities can take a stand and communities can take a stand and advocate for a closure of this like materials feedback loop, where things are constantly coming in that your waste system is going to have to deal with. And so I know that these all sound like maybe slightly lofty ideas, but the matter of the fact is, like, across the country, places are trying out these ideas in many different exciting ways. And it's not just in wealthy big cities like San Francisco, it's in places like small towns in Massachusetts, like in Baltimore, like in Austin. It's happening all over the country, and it's happening all over the world. And the master plan has a ton of inspiring case studies that illustrate all of these. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know I've covered a whole lot. I can pause if anyone has any questions right now, or Tom, I don't know if you were thinking later.
There is a part at the end for question and answer, but I don't mind. I've been trying to check the question and answer on the Zoom and on the Facebook Live. I haven't seen any yet. If anybody has a question, want to put it into either on the webinar Q&A or on Facebook, you can at any time, and we'll stop and answer it. But not seeing anything right now, I think we should just continue, and
Cool.
I'll let you know if something comes up.
Great. Yeah, so now that you guys kind of have an idea of what we mean by zero waste and what different kinds of zero waste policies in your community could look like, I want to talk a little bit about just transition. So next slide, please. So, a transition towards a different system is inevitable. Otherwise, our systems are going to collapse. Like, something is going to have to change, right? So that change is inevitable, but justice is not. So we could very well design a solution to waste that actually makes things a lot worse for people who have been historically burdened with these polluting waste facilities, right? There's no guarantee that solutions to environmental problems will mean that justice is served to environmental justice communities. So when we're talking about a just transition, we want to ensure that we aren't creating a process that is unjust, because if process is not just, the outcome will never be. So, the way that we're approaching zero waste, it's far more than just a means towards environmental goals, but rather a holistic tool of social intervention towards well-being for all. The Climate Justice Alliance, which is this great national sort of membership-based organization of a bunch of groups, including Gaia, that are on the front lines of fighting climate change. They say that just transition is a vision-led, unifying, and place-based set of principles, processes, and practices that build economic and political power to shift from an extractive economy to a regenerative one. So, we outline a bunch of principles that you need to be thinking about when designing policy, such as guaranteeing equitable access to all resources and shifting decision-making power to communities, particularly those who have been most impacted by injustice. Policies should create jobs for workers that pay family-sustaining wages and benefits. Jobs created through zero waste systems need to be guaranteeing occupational safety and health at all recycling and sorting operations and compost facilities and collections and throughout the local waste system. You know, like if we're talking about waste and not addressing the fact that sanitation work is one of the most dangerous jobs in the country, then we're missing a really important opportunity to promote worker health and safety. We need to generate cultural changes towards sustainability and respect for resources, which is where engagement is a key part of creating zero waste policies. Strong, culturally relevant community engagement early and often. We need to ensure that interventions in one community do not harm a community somewhere else. I live in New York City. The biggest trash incinerator in the city used to be a couple blocks away from where I live right now. In the mid 1900s, they sent it over to a different part of the city in a different predominantly low-income community with a lot of people of color. And then when that place shut down in the 90s, they started sending it over to one that was just in New Jersey instead of in New York City. So, you know, it just, once one community is relieved of that burden, it just gets sent somewhere else. So that kind of bopping around is not something that is acceptable, which it makes things tricky, right? Because when we're talking about policy, it's like generally you're looking at this one place. You don't have much of a say in what's happening elsewhere, which is why, you know, this is like an organizing approach. It's like an approach to the policy process that we're talking about when we say just transition. We also believe in making accommodations for disability and access. To win something as big as zero waste, we need everyone. And so that means making sure that our disabled brothers and sisters, our low-income families, our non-English speaking community members are all able to access and participate in these transformational shifts. And of course, holding polluters, particularly those who cause disproportionate harm, accountable for course correcting their actions. So, you know, all of these values are a little bit newer in, I think, in creating policy, like having these values as like the front of how we're talking about them. That's something that that's a conversation that we're trying to have more and more often with zero waste. How do we make this super community driven and super values driven at every single step of the process? Because historically, unfortunately, zero waste has been seen in the US as this kind of boutique lifestyle option for the wealthy. And whether or not that's true, and like it's not, communities of color and low income people have been practicing zero waste for a really long time. You know, especially Indigenous communities. And we're trying to sort of shift the conversation around what zero waste looks like, because shifting that narrative is going to be key to like successfully advocating for those policies at the government levels. So yeah, that's all I had on just transition. I wasn't sure how into it to go, but in the master plan, you'll see examples of organizations who are fighting for zero waste. Their incinerator has shut down in Detroit. But now, while they're organizing for zero waste solutions, as this incinerator shuts down, they're seeing the threat of gentrification, because for a long time, people didn't want to develop the area because the incinerator fumes were so toxic and stinky. So even though it would have been prime real estate, it was kind of kept at bay. But now they're fighting. It was kind of double-edged sword shutting down the incinerator, right? They were facing the threat of displacement now. So they're combining anti-displacement organizing with anti-gentrification organizing. And we're seeing something similar around fair development in Baltimore, and tying in fair economic development and housing development and urban blight into their zero waste planning processes. So a lot of really interesting, innovative stuff in creating holistic zero waste policies right here in the US. So some inspiring stuff to look into in a time where I think that's something we all really need. And again, I'll drop the link to where you can read about all of this in the Zero Waste Master Plan in the chat. And I see that Miriam is here.
Hey, Miriam. Yeah, I was gonna stop and say welcome. In addition to our panel here and discussion, and I just wanted to point out, I know that every time I do this, I learn something new about Zoom or about broadcasting on Facebook, but it looked like our comments in the chat were going to all panelists, and there's an option that actually says all panelists and attendees. You could see Jose actually made the first comment, we're talking about the fire from 1999. He said it felt like it was yesterday, but all of our other comments, I believe they weren't able to see. If you want to put the Zero Waste Master Plan again in there, I did put it on the Facebook comments as well. But yeah, I just wanted to go through so that the attendees were in on everything that we were sharing with each other. John, you mentioned it, but he mentioned that he's taken a tour of the Monterey County facility that actually has a pretty good program of getting reusable stuff out of the waste stream, and actually has a little store where they will sell still good and usable stuff that comes through. And I mentioned as part of it, the food waste, that 40%, I think that's a California stat, I'm not 100% sure, but that 40% of food goes to waste. And John also mentioned when you're talking about a just transition, and actually we need to take into account that a lot of these jobs, because these industries are in low-income, disadvantaged communities, that the jobs are there too. So we have to, in order to make this just for everybody, is create those new jobs of the future, clean and green jobs. And John made the point that also, I had said earlier that, that profit motive for the incinerator to burn, it actually falls on the city, because the contracts that they've had says that if they're not sending that 800 tons a day, that the city and the county actually have to pay to make up for the lost profit. So that's taxpayer money that's making up for that. So really the city and the county are de-incentivized to, like I said, not have curbside recycling in Modesto, for example, or not having that carpet recycling hub for the county. And I had to switch over. Miriam, you missed the conversation. We got started a little late because of a couple technical things, and then for somehow two different presentations were created, and so I switched over to the other one, which has your slides on it. So we're now joined by Miriam Gordon, previously of Gaia, now with Upstream, and a long time mentor and partner with Valley Improvement Projects, and a lot of the work that we've done around the incineration and around zero waste. And I wanted to quickly just go through the idea of this slide that I'm about to share right now. Almost forgot that I wasn't sharing my screen anymore. Let me share it real quick. This slide right here was just to show some examples of kind of where the state of California has been moving. So bills that have come through in the last 10 years, increasing the amount of minimum recycled content in products has gone up because the government has obviously control over their own facilities. They can mandate that their facilities use more reusable, recyclable, or compostable food packaging. Bans on plastic microbeads that get out into the environment and do a lot of harm. Requiring businesses to have recycling and organic waste bins in their facilities so that the consumer has the option of where to put that waste. state agencies, when buying certain products, have to make sure that they are made of recyclable material. Of course, everybody knows about the plastic bag ban, mattress recycling, carpet recycling, and setting goals for how much of the of our state's waste is diverted from the landfill. So I made this slide just to give people some idea of things that could be done on a local level. And myself and Miriam are going to talk about some of the ideas of how we can put the recycled tire rubber to the road and actually have some local actions where we're doing something about all these issues that we're talking about. And I forget what the next slide was. Oh, and that was the next slide. So for example, like VIP has been doing, advocating for increased recycling, keeping some of that stuff out of the incinerator and the landfill. I kind of mentioned earlier that when I toured the incinerator, I also toured the two waste hauler facilities, and it was basically explained to us that, you know, in Modesto, if you have the black bin and you're throwing something that is recyclable inside of there, it's about 99% chance that it's going to just go straight to the incinerator. So unless you're doing your own home recycling, you know, I put aside my recycling here at home and take it in myself. But if you don't have the time to do that, or even, you know, some folks don't have a car to pack up their recycling and take it to a center, and you're living in Modesto, there's no option for you. And that's mostly going and getting burned at the incinerator. And when you're burning recyclable material, you're taking that material out of the stream, and that means new material has to be created, new plastic, which also adds to greenhouse gases. So it comes around full circle. And as Miriam's going to discuss a little bit later, city and county ordinances, and actually Aditi touched on it too, some of the cities that have ordinances, or just businesses that are taking it upon themselves. We want to encourage and highlight that, and making sure you know, you're giving them your business because you care about that issue. And of course, has always been a campaign of VIPs. We want to eventually end the local trash incinerator, and it's getting up, you know, more than 30 years old, and they're not building any new ones. They're just shutting them down in California, and it's going to happen eventually. But like we said, there's, you know, I think around 40 people that are employed out there. They're probably from the local community. It is not our goal to just have those 40 people be unemployed. So we have to get down to the work of what it's going to be replaced with. Is that going to be, you know, good paying, clean, green jobs? You know, could be still in sorting, recycling, or other avenues that would help us cut down on this waste. And I believe your slides are next, Miriam. So I'll let you introduce yourself more and take it from there.
Well, thanks so much, Tom, and it's so great to be here with you all. I'm very passionate about these issues, passionate about shutting down incinerators. I've worked for more years than I care to admit in communities in California and New York on fighting incinerators, cleaning up hazardous waste, and helping reduce exposure to toxics and hazardous waste, both for workers and for local communities. That's how I got into this work, and over time have realized that the place where I really want to focus is on turning off the tap, basically stopping the waste before it starts, so there isn't any waste to feed into to incinerators like the Covanta incinerator in your community, and because that is the best way to protect our communities and our health. It's also good for the economy. Less waste to manage means less taxpayer dollars going into managing all that waste. It's more efficient for businesses in the long run not to have a lot of waste, and it's better for the planet. So that's why I joined Upstream a few years ago. As Tom mentioned, I had been working with Gaia, and we worked on together on carpets and on making carpets more recyclable and trying to get carpet recycling set up. Uh, and Since I joined Upstream, well, let me just tell you a bit about Upstream. So Upstream is a national NGO, and we work in communities all across the country on policy, implementing policies that um, reduce single use, that reduce waste and achieve zero waste. And we also help establish and accelerate new businesses that are working in this field of reusables and refillables. And we are launching pilot programs that create jobs in local communities for distributing reusables, so that when you go to a cafe or you get delivered food, that's delivered to you or provided to you in a reusable container, and there's somebody who will pick that container up, get it washed, wash it, and redistribute it back to the restaurant so they can pack it, so they can reuse it. So there are we launch those kinds of businesses, and we do a lot of culture changing communications around this idea of reducing single use. And We're a founding member of the Break Free from Plastic movement in the US. Next slide, please, Tom. And I'll just quickly give you a sense of what we're focusing on and what our priorities are. So we originally got into this issue of trying to solve the plastic pollution problem, plastics that are entering the ocean. And as we looked at that problem, we realized that most of the macroplastics, the big items that are entering our oceans, are coming from food and beverage packaging. It's like the stuff that you see littered on urban streets and that gets blown out of landfills and blown into our waterways, and it ends up in the delta, the bay, and eventually in the ocean. We realized that single-use foodware is a really big part of this plastic pollution problem. And if we and for us, we realize if we just ban the plastic, we're going to have a lot of other single-use foodware items made out of things like paper, metal, aluminum, that can be just as harmful. In the midst of a climate crisis, we shouldn't be cutting down trees to make a cup that we're gonna drink out of for 5 minutes and then have to dispose of, or switching to aluminum, which has very significant impacts in the mining, and very significant climate impacts. So for us, it is about getting rid of plastic, but it's also about getting rid of all single-use items that are unnecessary. We are focusing first and foremost on single-use foodware. And so our approach, I would just like to sort of pick up on the campaigns that Tom was talking about. We certainly believe in recycling and composting. Having, whatever waste is generated has to be recyclable or compostable. We don't want it going into incinerators, and we don't want it going into landfill. Didi, your waste hierarchy slide was much prettier than mine, and I want to copy that one. But this is the same concept here, this waste hierarchy that I'm showing you. Recycling and composting are definitely more preferable. Once we generate waste, is more preferable than energy recovery, which also means incineration and landfill. So if we're going to generate waste, we want it to be recyclable or compostable. But with foodware, that can be really challenging because recyclers need clean streams. And food packaging, once it's contaminated with food and beverages, it's generally considered too dirty to be recycled. Some products like our plastic water bottles. They're made of one singular plastic. They're not dirty after their use, and they are recyclable. But for most food packaging, it's too dirty to be recycled. So what about compostables? Well, for compostables, you need commercial compost facilities, which many communities lack. And for in areas where we do have commercial compost, what we're seeing is that what composters want is food waste and yard waste, because that provides a lot of high value, nutrient rich compost. They're having a lot of problems with food packaging, particularly plastics made from plants, bioplastics, but also other kinds of food packaging, which are generally seen as contaminants and not contributing good nutrient-rich material to compost. So for food and beverage packaging, focusing on making it more recyclable or more compostable, that's really that's challenging. So that's where we move up the hierarchy and we focus on the idea of reduce and reuse. Um, and so that's what we're focusing on, basically going throw away free, and stopping the waste before it starts, with reusables and refillables. And so we're working on policies all across the country that promote reusable bags, reusable cups, and food containers, just changing the way food and beverages are delivered to us. And we also focus on refill stations for consumer goods at the grocery store, and different policies for unpackaging products and reducing the unnecessary single-use in packaging. But in the middle of my slide, there's also just banning the stupid stuff, getting rid of the bad actor type packaging. For example, polystyrene foam or styrofoam, which is one of the worst plastics. So this is, I think that's the only slide. I don't think I have another slide, Tom, but oh yeah, I do. Sorry, I did want to talk a bit about, so that's sort of our framework for how we work, and I just wanted to give you a few examples of the kinds of policies that we've been successful in getting launched, that focus on ending this throwaway culture. So we're successful in last year in Berkeley in enacting the first ever ordinance that bans the use of disposables or single-use packaging for on-site dining at a restaurant. So think of it, once that goes into effect, McDonald's and Burger King and all the fast food joints and all the restaurants where you normally sit down and eat everything on single-use disposable products are going to have to change their model completely. It's a pretty culture-changing shift away from this idea of a completely throwaway packaged meal. The other thing that was groundbreaking about the Berkeley ordinance is that, taking a cue from our bag laws, our plastic bag ban with a charge for the paper bag that we have in California, we took a cue from that and said, well, single-use cups, paper and plastic cups that you do take out in, those things also should have a charge on them, so that we are incentivizing people to bring their own reusable cup, and we're also trying to get a shift so that cafes are providing us with reusable cups when we forget one. So we want to build in that incentive to drive towards reusables for takeout. And in Berkeley, we got a 25-cent charge on single-use cups in takeout. And there, Berkeley decided that the disposable products that they have are going to be not foam, only compostable in Berkeley's compost facility. So this ordinance inspired several other cities really soon after to enact a cup fee. We have 6 cities, but a total of 7 cities in California that now have a fee, a charge for single-use cups. And even one of them, the city of Arcata, enacted a container fee, 25 cents for each single-use food container and takeout. And 3 California cities did this ban on disposables for on-site dining. So that was pre-COVID. We were going to have a lot of big cities were lining up to mimic these fees and bans on disposables for on-site dining. We had California lined up, Los Angeles, New York City. We were expecting these wins in 2020. COVID has slowed us down, but we still have a huge amount of interest coming from cities all across the country. And also at the state level, we're getting more contacts from state legislators in these ideas of reducing all single use in food service. Anyway, so would love to keep up the dialogue and work with you on turning off the tap, turning off that waste stream that's ending up in the incinerator, because it's better for all of us. Thank you. That's it. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know if there are any because I don't see any in the chat right now.
Yeah, thanks again, Miriam. And I think that is, I'm just going to go back real quick to the other slide because you're getting to it, other cities and what they're doing. Like I said, the next step is we want to start taking some of these actions, building a coalition, that VIP hopes to be a part of local residents and other groups that are, interested in not just climate change, but also the local pollution that's created and the pollution that's created in our waterways and in different places in our environment. So thank you all for joining, and I'll go towards the end. That is our question and answer session. I don't see any from the webinar or in the chat. I don't see any on the Facebook video, but if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to enter it on there. And I will just say, while I give it a minute to see if any questions or comments come in, actually I'll go back to that one, but there's VIP's contact information, and we want there to be a second part to this, probably not until the beginning of next year, where we actually do dig a little bit deeper into some of these possibilities that we can do here locally. What do we think is possible? What us here in the Valley, we understand that the culture, when you bring up zero waste, people think you might be going too far. And Aditi mentioned it, perfectly. Like, well, you don't say that we want zero pedestrian deaths when we fix up our streets and street lights. We want there to be none, and that's the goal. So that's all we're trying to work towards, step by step. And we have some ideas. We'd love to hear other people's ideas if they want to contact Valley Improvement Projects. And you can put it, if you're on the webinar, you can put your information in the chat if I don't already have it. If you're watching on Facebook, or you want to send us an email or call, or go to our social media sites and give us your contact information and let us know that you'd like to be part of further discussions about these issues. And so hopefully at the beginning of next year, we'll be having maybe one or two, or maybe one longer discussion on how we can get down to the ground level and actually see some things implemented here locally that will cut down our waste. And I know, as John likes to say, stop feeding the beast being the trash incinerator. Hopefully the less waste we have and the more we're recycling, the less is going to be burned there, and the less they'll find it useful to have a facility like that. So just checking in, I don't see any questions. I see a couple of thank yous from our attendees on the webinar. So Jose, thanks for joining us. Bonnie, Genevieve, John, Dee Dee, or Miriam, thanks for joining us and your great insight and presentations. And you're definitely all welcome to be a part of future conversations around this issue, especially, you know, what do we do to build a coalition and a movement here locally to cut down on our waste, and in turn cut down on our pollution. Oh, I do see Miriam comments. We had a 1.5 year long process. Well-organized community coalition reached out to businesses, other community stakeholders, and then the city did their own engagement process. Happy to talk about organizing strategy later. Definitely, we'll be talking more about that. Obviously, there's going to be opposition to some of these things, and we're very used to that in the Valley of the issue always being made against, you know, having a clean, safe environment and having less impactful, you know, negative health outcomes, and having to choose between jobs and the economy. And that's what having a just transition is all about, is making sure that we're looking at both. You know, you shouldn't be forced to choose between having a job and having your kids, you know, have to be taken to the emergency room because they have asthma or respiratory problems, and there's a, you know, a bad air day, or when the, you know, the wildfires start up again, and more especially young people and older people are having to go to the hospital. You know, that costs the economy money as well. Kids missing school, people missing work, people not wanting to move here because they see that, you know, we have some of the worst air in the country. That costs the economy as well. So I think there's a way to address it all, and that's what we're here to try to do. It definitely won't be easy, but hopefully with the good collection of coalition of community members and our friends like at Gaia and Upstream and other organizations that we work with, we'll be able to put some creative proposals forward. So thanks again. And I was just checking one more time. I don't see any questions. So even for starting late, we're just a couple minutes past 6:30. So I think we did a great job. And thank you again for participating and being leaders in the field. And we'll do it again sometime. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Bye.
Thanks, Tom.
Oh, thanks. Take
Thanks,
care,
Tom.
everybody.
See you, John.
Bye-bye.
Bye.